During a recent press conference at the Oval Office, the U.S. president engaged in an extended discussion with the press, a practice he has frequently followed when hosting foreign leaders. Initially, he maintained a diplomatic stance, attempting to be accommodating and respectful toward President Zelenskyy, even when the Ukrainian leader made remarks that the president perceived as inaccurate. However, tensions escalated following a question posed by a Polish journalist. The president responded, followed by Vice President JD Vance, whose answer appeared to provoke a strong reaction from Zelenskyy. The exchange quickly intensified. Vice President JD Vance initially sought to de-escalate the situation, suggesting that further discussions be held privately. However, the president decided against this approach, opting instead to continue the debate publicly. The vice president noted a perceived lack of respect and entitlement in the interaction, but emphasized that the primary concern was the unwillingness of President Zelenskyy to engage in peace negotiations. The president had set a clear objective for his administration: to halt the ongoing conflict. However, the discussions broke down as Zelenskyy demonstrated resistance to pursuing a diplomatic resolution. Following the heated exchange, there were reports that Zelenskyy and his delegation attempted to re-enter the discussions multiple times. While the exact number of attempts remains unclear, at least one formal request was made. The president, however, declined, citing both the earlier disrespect and the lack of meaningful dialogue regarding a peaceful settlement. He reiterated the necessity of a concrete plan to end the war, emphasizing that indefinite financial and military support was unsustainable, not only from the American perspective, but also among European allies. Public sentiment in both the U.S. and Europe was shifting against the continued funding of the war, reinforcing the need for negotiations. Vice President JD Vance pointed out that some European leaders had encouraged Zelenskyy to persist in the conflict, framing him as a symbol of resistance. However, he questioned the practicality of this stance, asking how Ukraine could sustain a prolonged war without external financial and military backing. The president maintained a more pragmatic view, insisting that a resolution must be reached. Initially, the meeting with the Ukrainian delegation had been intended as a ceremonial event, where an agreement on mineral resource investments would be signed. This deal was designed to benefit both nations by ensuring a financial return to the United States while reinforcing America's long-term support for Ukraine's sovereignty. Following this, discussions were expected to progress towards a ceasefire and, ultimately, a negotiated settlement with Russia. President Putin had indicated a willingness to engage in peace talks with the new U.S. administration, though the president remained cautious, advocating a strategy of trust but verify. Despite the initial diplomatic intentions, the inability to establish even the preliminary framework for peace negotiations signaled deeper challenges. While acknowledging the Ukrainians' frustration and determination, Vice President JD Vance stressed the need for rational decision-making and diplomacy. He concluded by reaffirming that the conflict could not persist indefinitely and that all parties involved must recognize the necessity of finding a resolution. In the context of the prolonged conflict in Ukraine, world leaders, including Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and European heads of state, acknowledged that the war cannot continue indefinitely. The issue of Ukrainian lives, U.S. financial resources, and the supply of weapons are critical factors limiting the ability to sustain the war. Former President Donald Trump has proposed a realistic roadmap to achieve a peaceful resolution and has called on both President Zelenskyy and Russian President Vladimir Putin to pursue this path. A recent meeting on Friday highlighted this issue. The Biden administration had previously strongly criticized Putin, using numerous negative labels. Yet the war continued despite these remarks. According to President Trump, effective diplomacy cannot rely solely on verbal attacks, but must be built on a relationship that allows for dialogue. Ukraine is currently suffering severe losses in infrastructure, economy, and human lives, while Russia has also endured significant casualties. President Trump has emphasized that he wants to negotiate a peace agreement, but to do so, there must be a viable channel of communication with Russia. Regarding financial aid to Ukraine, President Trump stressed that the U.S. cannot continue funding the war indefinitely. European leaders publicly expressed their support for Ukraine, but in private conversations, many also voiced concerns about the sustainability of the war. U.S. allies need to be more realistic and encourage President Zelenskyy to engage in peace negotiations. Additionally, Senator Lindsey Graham, a strong supporter of Ukraine, has expressed frustration over the lack of progress in peace talks. He suggested that if Europe wants to defend itself, it should take more responsibility rather than relying on U.S. resources. President Trump pointed out that if even figures like Lindsey Graham are losing patience with the current situation, Ukraine must seriously consider coming to the negotiating table. The Biden administration had previously spent hundreds of billions of dollars on the war without a clear long-term strategy. In internal discussions, many Biden officials admitted that their approach was simply to continue supplying weapons in the hope that Ukraine could shift the tide. However, hope is not a viable strategy. According to President Trump, the only approach that can yield results is a clear negotiation plan, requiring compromises from both sides. Furthermore, President Trump's peace plan includes an economic agreement to rebuild Ukraine. He believes that one of the most effective security guarantees is to encourage American investment in Ukraine. This would not only help rebuild the country, but also create long-term economic incentives, rather than relying solely on a temporary military presence. President Trump has stated that if President Zelenskyy is truly serious about peace and willing to engage in discussions with realistic proposals, he would be ready to meet and discuss the matter. However, Ukraine cannot simply approach the White House seeking security guarantees without any commitment to making concessions. When this attitude changes, President Trump will be the first to pick up the phone to start negotiations. Regarding Russia, President Trump does not believe that Putin's commitments can be fully trusted, but he emphasizes the need for genuine engagement in negotiations. Constant criticism and isolation of Russia are not effective strategies. President Trump also noted that during his first term, Russia did not launch any invasions, demonstrating his diplomatic and strategic capabilities in maintaining peace. In summary, President Trump asserts that the only path to ending the conflict is through negotiations and the implementation of a concrete plan. He stresses that both Russia and Ukraine must make concessions to achieve a lasting peace solution. His policy not only aims to end the war, but also ensures Ukraine's long-term economic recovery through cooperation with the United States.